Hello, welcome to Good Questions, Good Answer. Today we have quite an interesting question from our audience. And again, our Venerable Sander helping us solve the problem. Venerable Sander, are you there?
Yes, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much for helping us out again this time. Anyway, the question that's coming today is why the children are being gifted. Have you ever wondered why? Well, Venerable Sander, can you help us solve this problem?
So we often hear stories about gifted children, and it's a very important topic because many schools, there are special schools these days for gifted children, and many families have gifted children into some extent. And some people might want to have gifted children, some people might not.
The question is, if it is, where does it come from, and how can one gain such a gift? Well, before we go to that far, can you give an example or namely a few who is gift?
Yeah. Well, one of the most famous examples is Mozart, of course, the composer.
All right.
He actually composed his first piece of music, which is very a complex piece of music, when he was only 5 years old, which is quite very. It's almost supernatural, you know. And another example is the British person called Daniel Tammet, who was from a child onwards. He was actually quite special, and he was able to feel numbers.
Feel the number. Can you explain a
Yeah,
little bit?
he can actually feel numbers. So normally when we think of numbers, the numbers don't mean anything to us, right?
No.
Unless you are only 30 years old and somebody says you look like you're 70, okay, then they start to mean something.
That feels something,
But
yes.
generally numbers don't mean much to us. But to him, every number has a specific feeling.
Oh.
So because of that reason, he can remember numbers very well, and he can make complicated calculations. So he actually holds the European record for memorizing and recounting pi, which is a number with many digits after the comma. Many digits. So he was able to recount 22,514 digits in about 5 hours.
Wow.
He could remember all of these numbers, which is amazing and absolutely out of the ordinary. And it's not only about being science. It's not only about science. He can also remember many languages. And they actually challenged him in a documentary to learn Icelandic language. Icelandic is an actual language. It's a small country in the north of Europe, the little island at the top, right?
Right.
And Icelandic language is pretty complex. It's a pretty complex Germanic language. And he was able to learn that in only 1 week, to the level that he could actually have a conversation on television and have a sensible interview.
Anyone else?
Yeah, it's not only about science, as I already said. There's one guy whose name was Kevin Richardson. He has this gift that he actually can communicate with wild animals. And wild animals, they don't feel threatened by him, so they don't attack him, even if they're very hungry. And it's like a sort of talent that he has developed.
Right.
And there's also the famous man whose name was Kim Peek. And he was the person on which the movie Rain Man has been modeled. So this Kim Peek, he remembers everything. So if he looks at a phone book, as is shown in the movie, if he looks at a phone book, he can actually remember all the people in the phone book. He remember every little detail. Wow. He never forgets anything. So that is very weird kind of talent or kind of gift. And there is also some people who have a sort of gift to tolerate things. In this case, it's a Dutch person whose name is Wim Hof. He's internationally known as the Iceman because he can tolerate ice and cold to an extreme level. And scientists are now investigating him because they have tried to expose him as a fraud, but they were not able to. Actually, science confirms his body does not respond normally to cold. So in Holland, they actually have done some research in the University of Nijmegen and other universities, and to try to identify what makes him stand out from other people. But this is very difficult.
Very difficult and special indeed. All these examples that you mentioned are very, very rare, and it's not difficult to combine and see such people having such a gift like this. Well, the question is, why or how did they get such a gift like this? Is it because of the nature, or is it because of the God, or is it because the heaven gift that give it to them? Can you explain a little bit to this so people can understand more clearly?
These are all good questions, Some people even say that these are all sort of levels of developmental conditions, They are not actually gifts, but they are just problems in the brain. So Daniel Tammet, for example, he is an artist. He's on what is known as being on the spectrum. And actually, Kim Peek was also an artist person, or I believe he was, or he had some other kind of developmental condition. So these are all people who have a gift, but they are sometimes dismissed as people who have problems in their brain. On a similar note, a more recent example is the young girl known as Greta Thunberg, if I pronounce that correctly. She is actually also known to have a developmental condition. Her brain is not normal as other people. But then that raises a lot of questions because she was able to do a lot of things that most people cannot. She was able to start a lot of new trends, to develop society and to raise awareness about the environmental, the future of the environment and the future of our climate change. So all of that raises the question, what is a gift? Is that just a side effect from being an autist person or something like that? Or being an Asperger person? Or is it just a coincidence, a statistic? So that raises a lot of questions about what it really means to be gifted and whether it's something desirable.
However, as it is, how did they give and why? Maybe can you give us such an example that may be clearly proven or clearly accepting at this modern time? A little bit understanding how does the gift come to? Maybe our audience can be more clarified on this.
Yeah, it's hard to give clear scientific evidence of what a gift is and what it means. But there are like examples which are also in the field of Buddhism,
Right.
For example, the example of the child known as Dumaruan. Now, Dumaruan is not. There are not any documentaries or even reports about him, not in English language at least. But he's actually a very special case. He was actually able to chant Buddhist texts when he was only very young. And maybe we can show some example of that.
Sure. Well, let's see.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Evam me suttam ekam samayam bhagava. Varanasiyam viharati isipatane nikadaye. Tantra
That's quite
So
interesting
you can,
chanting.
so yeah, so this recording goes on for about half an hour, and this child, it can barely read. It cannot
Wow.
read. It's only, the recording was made when he was about 5, 6 years old.
Okay.
So he cannot even read. So he knows this text by heart. And the only reason why the recording, there's a stop in the middle of the recording about after 50 minutes, because the recording was done in the 70s.
Oh.
So the technology wasn't that good in Sri Lanka at that time, but this child is just able to do a lot of things that normally adults cannot do. And then when he started to talk about his previous lives. He could remember previous existences, being a monk and being able to learn about Buddhism and being able to study Buddhism. So this shows a very interesting case that of a child that can remember the previous lives. And he could even remember his previous name. And he could also when he grew up, he became he started working for the Sri Lankan government to help with the religion department. And also later on, he became a meditation teacher, and he still is, as he's older now. So this is an example of a child that is also gifted, but in a more religious way. So these are all examples of people who are gifted, and it raises the question why. But in the case of the little child Damaruan, he himself explained that he could remember these texts because in a previous life he was actually a monk who learned these texts. So that is a very interesting example.
Well, that kind of remind me of one of the monks in Buddhism as well, who learned very fast from the Buddha and become enlightened. Can you recall his name?
Right. Venerable Bahiya.
Right. Can you tell him the story to our audience?
Venerable Bahiya was actually quite a special person, and the Buddha just has a few words, which are mostly about meditation, and then he suddenly becomes enlightened. But actually, there's an entire story before.
Right. Can you tell it?
So one day, there was a number of people that were on a boat, and when they were in the middle of a journey, the boat sank. It had a leak, and it sank. And then all the people, they drowned, but he was the only one who survived by seizing onto a plank, and then struggled to reach a port nearby. Because he had been floating on the water for such a long time, his clothes had all disappeared. He had to put off his clothes because of the weight. And when he came to the port, to the beach, he had no clothes on him. So he just got some branches from the wood, some sticks and twigs, and he put them on, put all the sticks, put all the wood on him, so that he was covered. The people, they thought he was a very religious man. People, they saw him, they didn't know he was. He had just arrived. he was just on the shore. They thought he was a very spiritual, very strict religious man who didn't wear any clothes because of his strict asceticism. So eventually, the people started to support him and offer him food, and they thought he was enlightened. And he had to play along, just to survive.
Yes.
So he played along, and then eventually he started to believe it. Because when we lie to other people, then eventually we start to lie to ourselves as well. And then he played along, and eventually he became, convinced that he must be enlightened. Then one day he had a vision. There was suddenly there was like this sort of deity, a sort of higher being, appearing to him in a vision. And he said to him, he said, you are not enlightened. You are not even on the path of enlightenment. You're not even close. So you should change your life and go to find the path to enlightenment. And this higher being, he saw him very clear, and he was very impressed by him. So Bahiya thought to himself, oh, I have done so much wrong. I've lied to other people and pretended that I was enlightened. And now I have to find another way. And then he turned to the spirit again, to the deity. And he asked, is there some other way that I can change my life? Is there some way I can change my life? And then the deity told him, Bahiya, in the north of India, in the north there is a city called Savatthi. At that time he was in a city in the port city, which was called Suparaka. Then he said, you have to go to Savatthi. Savatthi, there is a Buddha, and a Buddha is a fully enlightened person, and he can teach you. He's a wise person. He can teach you the path to enlightenment. And then Bahiya listened to that, and he thought immediately to himself, oh, I have been on the wrong path so long. I really have to change my life. So he immediately decided to run to Savatthi. And it was many kilometers. Yeah. You can look at the map, and it's a lot of kilometers. And he ran and he ran and he ran and he ran all night long, because he was so eager to meet the Buddha. And because he ran so long, he was able to eventually arrive in Savatthi, and completely exhausted, of course. And then he asked at the temple, where is the Buddha? Where is the Buddha? Tell me now. I want to meet the Buddha. He was so eager. And then they said the Buddha is going for alms round. He's walking with the alms, walking with the bowl, and he's receiving alms. He's receiving food from the people for his breakfast, for his meal. And then Venerable Bahiya wanted to speak to him immediately. So he ran after the Buddha, and he tried to find him. And then he saw him, and he said, Venerable Sir, can you teach me something? And then, but the Buddha, he knew that he also knew that he was very tired. And so he would like to, have him have some break first or something like that. But then Bahiya told, we never know how long we're going to live. Life is so uncertain. So I would like to just receive some little teaching from you. And then the Buddha, he said to him, in the seen, there can only be what is seen. In the heard, there can only what is heard. There can be only what is heard. In the thought, there can only be what is thought. And in the known, there can be only what is known. In other words, it's similar to meditation. When you see something, when you have some thought, you simply have the thought, but you do not
interact.
You don't identify or attach with the thought. So he immediately understood, and he became enlightened. Immediately, only one single text, little text. So one sentence, basically.
Wow.
So this is very special, very, very, very extraordinary. But unfortunately, he died soon after.
Just like he said, everything is uncertain.
Right. So when the monks asked about him, the Buddha said he became enlightened before he died. And they said, how can that be? He just met you. How can he be so enlightened so quickly? And then the Buddha, he said, it doesn't matter if you hear many teachings or only a few teachings, you know. The thing is that if you have heard only one little teaching of only one verse or one stanza, if you are at peace, if you use that teaching to achieve peace in your life, to develop your mind, to let go, to attain enlightenment, that is worth more than 1,000, 1,000,000 teachings.
That's quite
So
interesting.
this story just looks like it says something about the value of the Buddha's teaching, right? But it
Right.
also is there's also a preceding story which
That's what we want to
explains
know.
why the Venerable Baya
Yeah.
was so quickly able to attain enlightenment.
Yeah, that could explain why he's having such a gift, learning so fast.
Right, right. So in the previous lives, it turns out he was actually born in a time when Buddhism and the Buddhist practice had already more or less been lost. It was a time when there was a lot of harm done, where there's a lot of violence and a lot of bad things going on. So he, together with a number of friends of him, they decided they would go and live. They would climb on a mountain, and then they would remove the ladder, you know, and then they would just be on the mountain. And if they hadn't attained the ability to levitate through meditation, to float, to levitate through meditation, they would not be able to come from that mountain. They would just die because there was no ladder anymore. They could come from the mountain. There was no food there. So the Venerable Baya was also there, and he died in the process.
Oh.
He was not able to come down, but because of his dedication, in the next life, he only needed a few teachings from the Buddha to attain enlightenment. So this is the story. So when somebody's done something very extreme in the previous life, this may still have an effect on the present life.
I see.
So sometimes we may wonder, you know, how is our present life been affected by what we have done in previous existences?
That's quite interesting story that also inspire and encourage me and many people who are listening or watching this program. Well, thank you very much, Venerable Sander, for giving such an answer to this question. As it is, in conclusion, we can now understand now that life that we have right now is very precious, and it has also time limit as well. However, it's also uncertain when or how we do not know it's going to end. But one thing we know is that it also has its origin and value that we should be cherished, and also in order for us to proceed and progress further, we should do our present best as we can, and no matter what is going to be going to be collect in our mind. And so no matter where we go, what form are we reborn into, is going to be recorded and accumulate and remember in our mind alone. So therefore, as it is in such a case that you have mentioned earlier, Venerable Sander, this can also proving that everything that we do is already recording in the mind, and more or less it will be reshown, and in some specialized case, just like the case that you mentioned. And so everyone, being a gift or not, don't worry. What should be very focusing on is the present. If you do it good, it would be affecting you in the future for the good future and bright future as well. Thank you very much, Venerable Sander, for giving us such a good answer. So we hope everyone enjoy and find this answer be useful and apply into your life. We hope to see you again in our next question. Thank you, Venerable Sander.
Thank you.
See you again in our next question.
Yes, see you.